Our next speaker is Dr. Constance Neely, consultant for land, livelihoods, and climate change. Constance Neely is a senior consultant on land, livestock, livelihoods, and climate change with a focus on smallholder, pastoral, and silvopastoral systems. In mid-2010, she also joins the CGIAR World Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, part-time as a program development facilitator. She has served as a facilitator for sustainable development, sustainable agriculture, and rural development, and holistic, people-centered, and multi-stakeholder approaches for the last 20 years. She holds her doctorate in agroecology with an emphasis on conservation agriculture and is a certified international facilitator and holistic management educator. She served as the vice president for advocacy as Heifer International, and Constance has served as a visiting expert and senior consultant to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization in Rome for the last 12 years. Dr. Neely, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ray, for that introduction. It made it sound actually good, which is scary. But I want to tell you, I am completely humbled to be here. I am in front of an incredible array of experience and intellect, and I am in front of people who have taught me a lot. So I'm very grateful. I'm also following Sarah, which I can't imagine a harder job. She's magnificent. And I'm between you and your snacks. So let's see how we do. I want to talk about livestock, landscapes, and livelihood. So I'll be hopefully reinforcing and complementing some of the messages that Sarah was able to share with us this morning. I wanted to just set the stage by saying in 2010, we have just initiated with the United Nations the Decade of Deserts and the Fight Against Desertification. The word desert comes from deserere, the Latin, which means to abandon. Now, I find it extremely unfortunate that we have to have a decade that is focused on desertification. This is something that we've all been working on, land health, Rio, and we need to be working towards land health, but they have identified it as a focus area, so we can take advantage of that. But desertification and the drylands are so important, and so many people's livelihoods depend upon them. And so we must pay extraordinary attention. So this, I'm not going to read you the facts. I think we all know there's huge rationale for the work that you do as practitioners on the ground trying to address desertification, drought, and the multiple symptoms of unsustainable land management. But just to note a couple, 2.1 billion people depend on the drylands, and 50% of the world's livestock is supported in the rangelands within the drylands, and that a lot of our hot spots for loss of biodiversity are there as well. Huge threats, not just to the land, but of course to the people in these 110 countries that are suffering from land degradation. And it's also economically not viable, the management that we've seen. So thus a decade. But hopefully we'll be able to celebrate land health afterwards. So let's move on and talk a bit about the grasslands. The grasslands are a hugely important land use system globally. They occupy about 30% of the terrestrial land area and store up to 8% of the world's carbon. And when I talk about grasslands, I'm being extremely inclusive. So we've got what we would call rangelands, and also including lands that have trees and shrubs, etc. 1 billion people depend on livestock. Now, this is the thing I want to raise. I am a livestock advocate, and up until about 2 months ago, I was also a vegetarian. But we have 1 billion people. So if we took these 6 tables across this room, one full table would be completely dependent on livestock for their livelihoods. Pastoralism, which is the extensive areas, working on the extensive areas, 25% of the global land area is dedicated to pastoralism, with some 200 million pastoral households. And if we look at sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about 25 million pastoralists that manage some 40% of the land area, and another 240 million agropastoralists. And livestock is the fastest growing sector within agriculture. And in many of the countries in the developing world, it makes up over 50% of their gross domestic product. But we don't hear enough about it. In sub-Saharan Africa, I also would point out that they're managing those lands, 1/3 of which are desertified. What's happened to the grasslands? Over time, so much of our good grasslands have been converted. The pale pink is a conversion to croplands, and you can see that North America and South America are leading that trend. And then there has also been conversion to urban areas, which you see as well in North and South America. So we've really diminished what we have in terms of grasslands. We also have seen land use conversions. If you look at the upper left, 1700, the sort of pale green in that photo is, or on that map is the grasslands. And through time and out to 2050, it's anticipated that agriculture in the brown will clearly be taking over. So these are things that we actually, when you put those kinds of projections out there, as Sarah's mentioned on models, you can start to think about how you're going to manage differently. Of the grasslands, up to 35% are degraded globally, and I've seen numbers as high as 70. It's sort of the numbers you can play with, I have to admit. Sarah touched on this, that agriculture has been seen as really the problem child in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. 13% comes from agriculture globally, comes from the agricultural sector. It doubles if you start to talk about land use conversion that's used for agriculture. And then, unfortunately, within that, you have up to 80% of the agricultural emissions coming from livestock. And that's coming from manure, deforestation, and the enteric fermentation. So we need to talk a bit about what can we do about this, because livestock is going to be key to making a difference in terms of climate change. But we've started out with a bit of a bad rap. Here, this is some numbers from the Food and Agriculture Organization, which show it's the kilograms of carbon dioxide emitted per kilogram of protein from the animals. And you can see the lower bars in red from pig, poultry, milk, and eggs are far lower. Then you get to cows, and they say cows are the least efficient for the kilogram of meat. They have the highest kilograms of CO2 emissions in order to produce them. Yet, in the developing world, the projections of meat product consumption is increasing dramatically. And we have to be able to serve a lot of purposes there. Not only do we have to do that, we have another 3 billion people on their way.